So today we will build another generative patch from scratch, this time concentrating more on chords and generative chord progressions. For now, all I have is the beautiful mixer from MindMeld and a send reverb with plateau. So first of all, there are two modules I want to use that will help us with the chords, and those are the scale CV and the atomic CV modules from Aaron Static. We have the scale CV and the diatonic CV. Right, with the scale CV, we can select a scale. So let's go with, let's say, G Dorian, right? And the diatonic CV will generate chords according to this scale. So if I connect the scale output to the scale input of the diatonic CV, right, I can change the chords, and you can see all of the chords will be a part of the G Dorian scale. I can change the type, so major, 7th or 9th, right? I can change the inversion as well, and also the voicing. Right, so now let's add an oscillator. I will use, for example, the VCV VCO, and I will connect the chords. So the chord output will go to the volt per octave input of the VCO, right? And you can see already that it's polyphonic because it will send out multiple notes. It will send out a polyphonic signal, right? So now if I send a triangle wave to the mixer, we get basically chords. Right, now already there is something I like doing with polyphonic voices. So first of all, I like spreading them in the stereo field and also summing them into monophonic signals, so it's easier to deal with further down the line. So a nice module we can use for this is the spreader from Moskva, which will look like this. So I will send a triangle wave. Again, triangle wave is still polyphonic. It will go to the spreader. In the right-click menu, I have it by default set to merge poly output. So now from the left and the right, we will get a monophonic signal, stereo signal, right, that will be spread in the stereo field. We have also a bit of level control. So this is how it was before, and now we can spread it. Right, so now the different voices, the different notes will be spread left and right in the stereo field, which is always nice. Now, I would like this voice to have some volume movement, so it's not droning all the time. For this, we will use a VCA, and actually I will use the VCA before the spreader, right? And I will send a triangle wave to the VCA, and from the VCA back to the spreader. Now, the heartbeat of this patch, the so-called clock, will come from an LFO. I will use the LFO from VCV. Right, and already we can use the triangle output, for example, to control the VCA. Let me unmute this. Right, now you can see that the VCA will open only until the middle there, until the center. And that's because this LFO by default is set to bipolar, so it will oscillate between -5 and +5 volts. This VCA is working from 0 to 10, so all we need to do is change the offset here to be unipolar, and then it will go from 0 to 10 instead of -5 to +5, and now the VCA will work properly. Right, now to make this a bit more generative, more alive, we will use sample and hold. Also here I will use the sample and hold from Moskva. Right, not only that we have 8 channels, 8 sample and hold sections, but we can also change the range for each section, and we can add also probability, which is great for generative patches. Right, so I will trigger the main trigger input, the common trigger with the LFO. I will use the square output to trigger the sample and hold, and we will use one sample and hold to modulate the frequency of the LFO through the FM input, frequency modulation. Frequency in this case, it's rate, right, the speed of the LFO. Right, so what's happening here basically is that with each cycle of the LFO, it will trigger the sample and hold, which will in turn change the rate of the LFO, which will trigger the sample and hold, which will change the rate. So we created this sort of a modulation feedback loop, and each LFO, each cycle of the LFO will be a bit different. Right, now we can use more sample and hold to modulate the chords. So with each cycle of the LFO, we might get a different chord. And of course, we will add also probability to this. So let's use one sample and hold to modulate the chord. Now the chord CV input, I believe, is 0 to 3 volts. The type is 0 to 4. I'm not so sure about the inversion and voicing. So let's just change this to 0 to 5. Here we have -10 to 0, so we'll change this to 0, and here we'll leave it at 5 and add some probability to this. Right, the same with the type, 0 to 5 and probability, the same with the inversion. Right, so there is a chance that things will change with each cycle of the LFO. Right, A minor, C9. A minor, B9, flat 9, whatever. Let's add nice reverb to this. Oh yes. Okay, now to add more character to this sound, we will use noise. Right, and I will send red noise, which is quite dark, to the FM input of the oscillator, right, as modulation. I'm using color coding here, by the way. So red is audio, green modulation, yellow pitch information, and blue for gates, triggers, and clocks. Right, so now if I add a lot of this noise, we will get basically one big mess. Right, but if I add just a bit, it will add this warble to the sound. So I'm on Windows, I'm holding Control and Shift, just so I can move this knob really slightly. Right. So this is without. And now with. Right, it adds this warble to the sound. Okay, now I don't want this voice to play all the time chord after chord. I want it to have some probability. For this we will use another VCA that I will place here, right next to the first VCA. And now I will send the LFO that we are using here to open the VCA. I will send it first through this second VCA. Right, so now I can control its amplitude, right, with the second VCA. And we will use a Bernoulli gate to add probability to this LFO, if it will go through or not. So for this I will use chances from Count Modular. By the way, I'm sure you saw this already, but I'm using here favorites. I just saved all of the modules we will use in this video here, so it's easier to find. Right, so here we have chances, right, and I will use the pulse output or the square output from the LFO. This will go to the input, and now there is a chance that this pulse wave or square wave will come out of output A or output B according to the probability we can set here. Right, but you will see that this is not good enough. If I use output A, right, we get short gates basically, or two short gates, right, that will open the VCA for this LFO. This is not really what I want, because again those gates are too short, and there's a chance that they will come out of output A twice or 3 or 4 times in a row. I don't want this, I want to have more space. Right, so I'm going to change this to latch with this switch here. Basically now what it means that as long as output A is chosen, we will get a gate that will stay open from output A, and this will give us better results. So let's listen to this a bit. Right, sometimes it will play, sometimes we will have chords, sometimes we will have just like now silence. By the way, if you are familiar with Boolean logic, so basically I'm using the VCA here as an AND logic. So if you want to use a logic module, an AND logic module, you can also use it whenever the output from chances and the LFO are both high or on, right, the LFO will come through. So it's basically more or less like an AND logic. If you are interested in more patching tips and techniques, I have a document full of ideas on my Patreon page, links in the description. Okay, so now let's do this. Let's take the notes of the chords and arpeggiate them with another voice. So the voice we will use, the oscillator we will use will be energy from the geodesics. Right, this will be our voice. And to arpeggiate the chords, we will use the Arp module from Hampton Harmonics. Right, I will use the polyphonic chord output. This will go to the volt per octave input of the Arp module. Right, and we need a gate to tell the arpeggiator when to arpeggiate the chords. I will use for now just an offset, so the gate will always be on and the chords will always get arpeggiated. This will change later on, but for now again I will use offset, send the output to the gate input, and now when I open the offset all the way up, right, the gate will just stay high and the chords will always be arpeggiated. Now we need also a clock, right? Some sort of clock to tell the Arp how to arpeggiate the notes in what rate, right? So I will use another LFO from VCV. This will go to the clock input, maybe a bit quicker. I will send the volt per octave output to energy already. And let's have a listen to this, right? Right, so now we have basically arpeggiated chords. So now we will do this. First of all, I'm going to change the second oscillator of energy. Maybe I will take this an octave down, just a second. Just entered here -1, so it's an octave down. Now the second oscillator of energy we can set to be an LFO. Energy is nothing more than a ring modulation oscillator, which is basically amplitude modulation. Ring modulation is another type of amplitude modulation. Amplitude modulation is tremolo. So if I set the second oscillator to the yellow mode, this is LFO, and now we get tremolo. Right, so if I take it all the way to the left, the voice will come in and out according to the pitch or the rate of this second oscillator. Right. Okay, so now let's use another sample and hold to modulate the frequency of this LFO. So the rate of the Arps will also have some movement to it. Right, another sample and hold to modulate the timbre of energy through this FM input. Right, let's add some reverb to this already. Oh yes. Right, and we can use another sample and hold to modulate the direction of the Arp. Right, we can add 0 to 5 and again some probability. Right, to add even more movement, I can use the first LFO, right, which is also changing all the time. I can use the sine wave, for example, to modulate the panning of this voice. Again, this is a unipolar LFO, so it will start here from the center and go all the way right. I want it to go also left, so I will take the pan knob all the way left, and now it will have the full range. Right, now also here I don't want this Arp to play all the time, to be always arpeggiated. So what I will do, I will use another chances. Right, and I'm going to set it up instead of the offset. As I said before, I will change the offset later on. So now I will use again the LFO, the first LFO that we used, to chances. Again, I will change this to latch mode, so we will get longer gates. And now this will be basically the gate for the arpeggiator, the offset module we don't need anymore. Right, so now there is a chance that the gate will be high and the notes will be arpeggiated, or there is a chance that they will not be high and we will get just a sustained note out of energy. And again, it has also volume movement with the tremolo that we set up here. Okay, now let's add a bass. I will use Saich from Instruo and also the IO47 filter also from Instruo. Right, I will send Saich to the input of the filter and the low pass output will go to the mixer. Right, and now for the pitch we will do this. I will use the split module from VCV. Right, this will split the polyphonic signal. In this case we will use the chords. It will split it into individual notes. So I'm going to send the chords to the poly input. Right, we have now 4 channels. Sometimes we will have 5, sometimes 3, depending on the chords. Right, so now we'll have individual notes coming from the outputs. Right, so if we use, for example, the first output, we should most of the time get the bass note of the chord. Right, so this we will use with Saich. Right, but of course this note might be a bit too high for a bass. So what we can do, we can use the octave module from VCV, which is called also Oct, which is quite funny to use with modules from Instruo. So we will send the pitch through it and take it down by 2 octaves, add some resonance on the bass. Right, we can also activate the sub oscillator of Saich. If I click it 3 times, you will see here the control light will turn sort of amber and it will be sub oscillation with pulse width modulation as well. So there is also some movement, 1, 2, 3. I will add also reverb here. Right. Oh yeah. Okay, now let's add some movement to the filter. I will use Walk from Bog Audio, which will output, I can show you this on the scope. It will output smooth random voltage, right? So this can go to the FM input of the filter and modulate the frequency of the filter a bit. Right, just to add some movement. And I will use again white noise in this case. I will use again noise in this case, white noise in the second input of the filter, right, to add more character. Right, just to have a bit more crunch to the sound, I guess. Right, I also want to modulate the panning of this voice. I will use another walk, maybe not at full scale, and this will modulate the panning of the bass. Yes, the bass will be modulated a bit left and right. Why not? Okay, another tool we will use from Aaron Static is the Random Note CV. This module here, maybe I can zoom in a bit. Right, here we can trigger random notes. Right, they will be quantized to a scale if we use a scale here. So I am going to use the scale output to the poly in, and now all of the notes will be a part of the G Dorian scale. Right, so now for another voice we will use Basal from Volt and Wolf from Volt, which is a wave shaper. Right, Basal will go to Wolf. I will use the pitch information already. Right now, again, also here I would like some level control, so I will use another VCA. Right, Wolf will go to the VCA, this will go to the mixer. Right now, for opening the VCA and again having a sort of a generative clock, in this case we will use the AD envelope, the attack decay envelope from Nischi, which can also loop. Right, so I'm going to set it, let me zoom in a bit. I'm going to set it to loop here, right, and trigger it once, and now we get basically a looping envelope, as you can see here, right, a sort of a unipolar LFO. Right, so now what we will do, we will use the sample and hold from Bog Audio, which has two sections of sample and hold. Right, I will use the end of cycle output trigger. This will output a trigger whenever the envelope ends its cycle. So this will trigger the sample and hold and also the change in notes. Right, and the sample and hold in turn will modulate the envelope, so the attack and decay. So again, the envelope triggers the sample and hold, the sample and hold modulate the envelope, which triggers the sample and hold, which modulates the envelope. So again, we have a sort of a feedback loop modulation that creates a really nice generative clock, and in this case also envelope source, right? So this envelope can modulate now the VCA or control the VCA. Some reverb. Right. Now, if you are not 100% familiar with sample and hold, looping envelopes, and other building blocks of Modular, I have a series of videos where I go through the different building blocks of Modular with the help of VCV2. So if you are interested, links in the description. Okay, now let's add more movement. I will add caudal, also from Volt. Also caudal will output smooth random voltage, but in the case of caudal it will be a bit more chaotic, right? This we will use to modulate the width of Wolf, right? Again, just to add some movement here. And also Basal 1 and 2, maybe take the speed a bit down. Right, something like this. Let's also modulate the panning of this voice. I like it when things are moving everywhere in the stereo field. Okay, now I will add another module here that will trigger the envelope whenever you open the patch. So if you download this patch, again, links in the description, and you open it, the envelope, the attack decay envelope will be triggered and will start looping and everyone will be happy. Right, this is the startup delay from Count Modular. Again, you open the patch, it will output a trigger. This trigger will trigger the envelope, so it will start looping and the patch will start going. Right, now all we need is some sort of a noise that will go everywhere. Again, left, right, nice amount of reverb. So what I will do, I will add the filter bank, the 6-channel filter bank or 6 filters bank from Bog Audio. Right, we have low pass, we have high pass, and we have 4 bandpass filters. If I take them a bit down, we can see exactly what will happen. Those are basically the levels of the filters, right? And in this case, I'm going to use pink noise. Right, so if I add this here, I can bring in the highs. Right? Basically bring in the noise. I will not use the first 3 bands. No need for them, I don't want the low frequencies. Right, but the other 3 bands we can modulate with caudal, the levels of the other 3 bands, 1, 2, and 3. Now as soon as you connect something to the level input, in this case, it works with most of the Bog audio modules. The faders now will become attenuators, so I'm going to take them all the way up. Right, so the modulation will be at full speed, not at full speed, at full strength, let's say. This will modulate the panning as well, caudal, and caudal is bipolar, which means that because of how those CV inputs work, again, now the faders are attenuators. We will not get the full range of modulation after all. So I'm just going to get the level here a bit up on the mixer. Right, and again, add lots and lots of reverb. Right, I hope you can hear the noise. Now, of course, you can add so much to this patch, like you can add field recordings, you can add all sorts of unsynced loops, you can jam on top of this, but this is more or less the patch. Again, there's a link in the description to where you can download it. Feel free to use it and share your results with me. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this patch, and I'm going to let it play a bit. Cheers.